My name is Blakely. That day, I was supposed to become a bride, broadcast live on millions of screens, hand in hand with the man the entire country believed was perfect. But when the camera panned to my face, I didn't read the vows. I looked straight into the lens, smiled, and said, I would have said yes if he hadn't slept with the bridesmaid and her husband. Followed. My mother collapsed, and Thomas McGrew froze, his smile stiff on his face like plaster. Have you ever loved someone so much you thought you'd spend forever with them, only to realize you were just an episode in their reality show? If you've ever felt like a supporting character in your own life, leave a comment. And if you want to know what I did after that public unmasking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me as I expose everything behind that picture-perfect lie of a love story. I'm 31, living in Chicago and working as a freelance interior designer. I used to think I was lucky, not because of my career, but because of Thomas. Thomas came into my life like a summer breeze. Warm, full of promise. He worked in television, producing a string of hit reality shows. Every time we walked outside, someone recognized him, asked for a photo or an autograph. He always smiled politely, always knew exactly what to say. And to me, at least in the beginning, he was gentle, like he loved me more than anything in the world. We met at a community arts fundraising gala. I was organizing blueprints in my bag when Thomas walked up, handed me a glass of wine and said, If you're not drinking, at least give me a reason to stand here a little longer. It sounded cheesy, but I laughed. We were together for 3 years. People said we made a beautiful couple. Him, the celebrity, me, the creative. Thomas loved to tell stories, and I knew how to turn space into emotion. Sometimes, I believed we were two perfect pieces in a frame he had carefully crafted. Turns out, he really had crafted it. Last year, Thomas started producing a new reality show called Forever Vows, a series capturing the fairy tale journeys and weddings of special couples. That's when he suggested we become the featured couple for the next season. You're the one I want forever with, Blakely, he said, brushing my hair back, looking into my eyes. We have such a beautiful story, why not share it with the world? I hesitated. I'm not the kind of person who likes putting emotions on camera. But Thomas had a way of making everything sound like a dream. He painted a vision of us telling our sweetest memories, our first date, the first time he cooked for me, even if it was frozen pizza, the night I got sick and he stayed up with me. He even said it would be a gift for our future children, something they could watch one day. From that point on, my life stopped being private. There were days the cameras showed up from 8 in the morning to 9 at night. They wanted me waking up with natural bedhead, walking into the kitchen with that adorably sleepy look, then sitting for breakfast beside the perfect man. What no one saw was that behind the sweet breakfast scene, I was the one who made the meal, cleaned the kitchen, and Thomas was usually late. The more we filmed, the more I felt myself disappearing. Everything in the apartment started getting redesigned for TV aesthetics. My wardrobe was replaced with the outfits they wanted me to wear. I was told to repeat lines for a clearer emotion. And any time I said I was too tired to shoot, Thomas would glance at me and sigh. You know, the whole crew's waiting, right? So I stayed quiet, endured it, not wanting to inconvenience anyone. And every time I voiced discomfort, Thomas would gently smile and say, You're being too sensitive. Relationships are about building something together, right? Or worse, guilty people are always defensive. You know that. Whenever I pushed back, he made me feel like I was the unstable one. I cut down my work hours, turned down big projects so I'd have time for filming. I canceled a beach trip with Sloan because Tomas wanted to plan a new episode. I pulled money from my savings to redecorate the apartment the way the producers wanted. One day, while sketching a bedroom design for a client, I dropped my pencil 3 times because my hands were shaking. Sloan, my best friend since college, came by and found me slouched in the corner of the couch, hair messy, no makeup, eyes red like I'd been crying. She didn't say anything, just set a coffee down beside me and sat close. After a while, Sloan looked at me and said, You're shrinking, Blakely. Every time I see you, there's less of you. Your smile, your eyes, the way you talk about the world, it's all being compressed to fit his frame. I gave a faint smile, pretended not to hear. But that night, when the cameras were off, I sat in the dark bathroom, staring at the foggy mirror, and asked myself, when did I start turning into someone else? And for whom? The picture-perfect love story kept filming, but from that moment, I quietly began to step back, to watch and figure out if I was in a relationship or in a script. And I had no idea what horrifying truth was waiting behind that curtain. I still remember that morning like it burned into my memory. Thomas had left early for a production meeting. I woke up later than usual, partly out of exhaustion, partly because I had nothing to rush for. Breakfast was cold by the time I sat down. I opened my laptop to check emails from clients, and then a new notification popped up. An alert from Thomas's work group. He often uploaded shared files for the crew into Google Drive and sometimes left access open to me. Because you're part of the journey too, Blakely. That day, I hadn't planned to look. But one new folder caught my eye. Episode 12, The Proposal. I opened it. Inside was a PDF file, over 30 pages long. A script, not a general outline, but a word-for-word breakdown of our scene, including the setup, the cues, how I was supposed to react when Thomas got down on one knee, what he would say, and even which emotional expressions the camera needed to catch when I was tearing up. My proposal, what I believed would be one of the most sacred moments of my life, had been storyboarded like a sitcom scene. I don't know how long I stared at the screen. Then I found something worse. Another folder. Behind the Curtain by Aubrey Media. It contained a string of messages between Thomas and Aubrey. The so-called bridesmaid, my old college roommate, the one I'd chosen thinking she understood me better than anyone. The messages started off innocent, talking about dress colors, speeches, hairstyles, but they quickly slipped into something else. Thomas sent a voice note. The way she said, "I don't think I look good in white," made me want to laugh in her face. You know, if you were the lead, the shot would be so much better. Aubrey replied with a bunch of laughing emojis followed by, "Wait till rehearsal night. I'll show her who the real main character is." My stomach twisted. That night, when Tomas came home, I still made dinner like usual. I smiled, asked him how the meeting went. He said, "Great, are you ready to be famous?" I looked him in the eye and nodded. But inside, I started preparing something else. The next day, I told Sloane everything. In her car. The windows were rolled up, the air conditioner humming like a steady breath. She listened without speaking, her eyes looking at me like someone who's seen flames behind pretty wallpaper. "Do you want to cancel the show?" Sloane asked. I shook my head. "I don't want to run from this performance, Sloane. I want to see how far they'll take it." There was a pause, then she leaned over and pulled a business card from her wallet. "I know someone who used to work as a private investigator for a law firm I interned at. If you're ready, I'll ask him to help." 3 days later, Mason, the private investigator, sent us an email with the preliminary report. It included proof that Thomas had a secret email account where he exchanged messages with a man named Lucas. Aubrey's husband. The last time I saw him was at Thomas's birthday party. Lucas brought Italian wine and shook my hand firmly, saying, "Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness." Looking back, that toast tastes bitter, like the dregs of decency at the bottom of a glass. But what gave me chills was the content of the email. "Contract's the same. You keep the Happy Family Act going, I'll give you 10% per episode. Whatever's between me and A, I'll handle it. You and your wife, I don't interfere. We're making money off this script. Don't let feelings ruin it." Sloane cursed out loud after reading it. I sat in silence, gripping my glass of water so tightly the rim cracked. I didn't know what hurt more. Thomas betraying me, Aubrey betraying me, or the fact that they were using my life as a stepping stone to build their careers. As a piece in this reality TV game, I thought I was the lead in my own love story, but clearly, to Thomas, I was just background talent taught how to cry on cue. That night, I sat for a long time in front of a black screen, slowly running my hand over the printed proposal script, then looking at the half-finished design sketch on my desk. One question echoed in my mind, as if someone else was reading it aloud for me. If this is all a script, then why shouldn't I be the one to rewrite it? Flynn whispered, "Let him finish the scene. But the audience, that'll be ours. And just like that, the show went on. But I had started building my own stage. I woke up at 3 a.m. not because of a noise, not because of a nightmare. It was a tightness in my chest, formless, unnamed. Thomas was asleep beside me, snoring softly. The apartment was still. Only the glow of the street lamp streamed through the curtain, casting a faint line on the ceiling like smoke. I picked up my phone to check the time, but habit made my thumb slide to email. One unread message. Internal thread. Episode 13 pitch. Sender, Ethan, the show's main production coordinator. A guy so good at creating drama, he'd once been nominated for a reality TV award. The email thread dated back to the previous afternoon. Tomas replied to the group. The proposal episode needs a strong twist to land emotionally. The audience is starting to suspect the show's staged. We need a real backstab, something that happens in real life but accidentally gets caught on camera. Someone else responded. You mean real betrayal? Is that even legal? And Thomas had written this. Blakely's not going to leave me, trust me. She's the kind who tries to fix everything until the very end. If Aubrey nudges the moment a little, a hand touch, a suggestive pause, that's all it takes. We let the cameras accidentally catch it. Viewers will go wild, and if Blakely finds out, even better. I don't remember how I breathed after that. I just remember sitting up, walking into the kitchen, pouring a glass of water and not drinking it. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the one I designed, picked every tile, every porcelain cup, and realized even the space I created was now being used to betray me. Outside, the night wind hissed through the cracks. Inside, I stood still as stone. When I returned to the bedroom, Thomas was still asleep, one arm draped across my waist, like he was the loving partner, like this whole life was just another well-blocked scene. I gently slid out from under his arm, grabbed my phone, and opened notes. I started writing, not a diary, not a reflection, a timeline. Episode 9, Thomas said he had a meeting, but the behind-the-scenes camera caught him standing with Aubrey behind the truck, his hand on her hip. Episode 10, he told me to wear a blue silk dress even though he knew I was allergic to the fabric, because the camera likes that color better. Episode 12, he leaked a version of the script I'd never seen before, complete with my tears. I started saving messages, transferring email files to a separate hard drive. I changed my iCloud password. I installed a covert recording app on my phone, checked Illinois' one-party consent laws. I started collecting data. The next morning, when Tomas came into the kitchen, kissed my cheek and asked, "Sleep well?" I said, "I had a strange dream, but not a bad one." He smiled, busy making coffee, unaware that my eyes never left the laptop on the table. I had set up a webcam facing the couch the day before. No red light, quiet recording. Day after day, I kept smiling for the cameras, kept baking, kept picking wedding dresses that matched studio lighting. But inside, I was directing my own show, scene by scene, piece by piece. One afternoon, while gluing a mock-up for a client's interior design, Thomas sent a selfie with Aubrey and captioned it, "Don't be jealous, she's just helping me pick the ring." I saved the photo, filed it under the setup, opening act. Sloane was the only one who knew what I was doing. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a new hard drive and said, "Record everything. Then we'll pick the moment." I didn't know what the moment would be, but I knew I wouldn't collapse before it came. I used to believe love meant endurance, patience, sacrifice. Now I believe in something else. The truth. And the truth, even when it hurts, is worth more than any scripted performance. If Thomas saw me as a character, then I had every right to become the writer. Not with screaming or sobbing on set, but with strategic silence. With every camera angle I arranged myself. With the way I stared straight into the lens. Not as someone playing a part, but as someone remembering. Sloane was the first person I fully trusted with the plan. She was freelancing as an editor for indie channels, had even worked on documentaries. Her skill with audio and footage was basically a secret weapon. One Friday night, I brought the hard drive to her small apartment. The smell of buttered popcorn mixed with electronics gave the room a warm but tense energy. I opened the folder labeled Backstage Raw. Footage I'd secretly saved from the behind-the-scenes camera or my phone. Sloane pulled her chair closer and opened the editing software. "You ready?" she asked, hand resting gently on the mouse. I nodded. On screen appeared Thomas during a rehearsal scene for the proposal. Cameras weren't rolling officially, but the mic was live. He was standing next to Ethan, the production coordinator. Tomas laughed, adjusted his tie, and said, "Blakely really thinks it's all real. She doesn't get it. This is television. Every bride on this show is an unpaid actress. Only difference is, she doesn't know she's acting." Ethan replied, "At least she looks decent on camera. You're right, the camera loves her, but in real life..." Thomas cut him off with a smirk. "She's a temporary media product. Looks fine if the lighting's right, otherwise easily replaced." I memorized it. All of it. Every word, every laugh. Sloane paused the video, turned to me. "We need to categorize this. Humiliation, deceit, emotional manipulation. We've got a whole archive here." From then on, we edited every night. After wrapping up the perfect love scenes with Thomas, I'd go to Sloane's apartment, bringing more backstage clips, more meeting audio, more screenshots of texts between Thomas and Aubrey. I wore the wedding dress like they wanted. I smiled on camera when Thomas held my hand and recited his sweet scripted lines. But in my mind, I was studying lighting, camera angles, every facial cue. I remembered how he squeezed my hand tighter when the camera turned, then let go the second it cut. I learned how to tell a real clap from a fake one when the director yelled, "Cut." I noticed how Aubrey crossed her legs and pursed her lips whenever someone complimented me, then turned away to call Lucas during lunch break. One day, while I was pretending to try on veils, Thomas came up behind me, placed his hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You know, if this season hits 10 million views, I could land a contract with Amazon Studios." I turned to him, eyes glowing like a woman in love. "That's amazing, you deserve it." Thomas didn't see anything wrong with what he'd said. Didn't realize he had just turned me into a stepping stone in his race through the world of television. But I saw it clearly. This wasn't personal anymore. This was a story about power, and who was really holding it. Sloane and I called our documentation archive folder X. Inside, we divided everything by topic. X1, Thomas talking about me like a product. X2, Thomas and Aubrey discussing believable drama setups for the cameras. X3, Lucas and Thomas negotiating how to share the role, a thinly veiled reference to their wives. X4, scenes, where I was directed into tears. There was one clip I'll never forget. Thomas, behind the camera, talking to Ethan about a scene where I had just cried from exhaustion after 12 hours of filming. I told her to channel the grief from when her aunt died. "Look at that. The camera loves real tears." Ethan chuckled dryly. "Real tears are worth more than CGI." We cut that clip, slowed down the part where Thomas looked at me with a satisfied grin, then zoomed in on my face, wiping tears, nodding to thank the crew. Sloane didn't say anything, but I felt her hand gently rest on mine as we finalized the edit. "We're turning this into a documentary, and it's going to air at the perfect moment," she whispered. I was no longer the supporting actress. I was the director of the finale. I still wore the wedding dress, still picked the flowers, still filmed the mock proposal dinner that Thomas and his team had meticulously planned. But now, more than anyone, I knew. The camera doesn't capture moments, it captures the truth. The question is, who holds the final edit? And in this case, that person was me. I was at the studio trying on wedding dresses when I got a text from Ethan, the show's production coordinator. "Get ready for a big surprise this afternoon. Tomas says it's a golden moment." I didn't have to ask. I knew the kind of gold they meant. Tears, an emotional twist before the wedding, a reunion scene, timed to the second for maximum emotional payoff. And just as I expected, around 4 p.m., with the cameras rolling and the lights set to a perfect 3-point setup, Thomas walked into the studio with a satisfied smile, followed by 2 people I never thought I'd see again in this setting. My parents. Mom wore a cream coat, hair neatly styled, makeup soft. Dad followed behind, holding a fedora loosely in one hand, eyes scanning as if counting how many cameras were pointed at him. My hand still held the edge of the wedding dress the stylist had adjusted. I hadn't seen them in nearly 4 years. Ever since I moved in with Thomas, they had cut contact. "We didn't raise a daughter to skip church and choose a life like this," my mother had written in her final email. They weren't there for my birthdays, not a word when I was hospitalized for exhaustion, not a single message when I announced our engagement. And yet here they were, under bright studio lights, walking toward me like they had never left. The director whispered behind the camera. "Switch to center angle." When Blakely turns, zoom in slowly on Mom's eyes. Thomas stepped closer, placing a hand on my back, and murmured, "I know it wasn't easy for them to come. They love you. Can you give them a chance?" I didn't answer, but I knew exactly what this chance cost. Sloan had already shown me the transfer from the show's production account. $8,500. Memo line: family appearance, wedding special, emotional arc. Emotions now had a price tag. We sat down on a white sofa, part of a modern fairy tale set, the camera angled from the side, warm lighting. My mother spoke first. "Blakely, I know we've had our differences, but I don't want to miss your special day." Her voice trembled like she was fighting back emotion. My father nodded. "You're my daughter. Always have been. No matter what happened, I always hoped to see you happy one day." The director gestured behind the camera. An assistant leaned in and whispered, "Is she saying anything?" He muttered, "Not enough. Now's the tear moment. Ready? Now cry. We need tears." Fortunately, they didn't know I was wearing the earring Sloan gave me, fitted with a mic no bigger than a pinhead, recording everything. I turned to my mother and smiled softly. "You know, there are things I used to hope I'd hear from you much earlier." She took my hand and squeezed it. The camera cut. The director waved his hand, annoyed. "Let's shoot the hug again. Use fake tears if we have to." At that moment, I caught my dad glancing toward the director, then toward Tomas, his expression flickering with unease. I understood. They hadn't returned for me. They came back for the scene. I stood up, gently, on cue, just like a good bride would. I held my mother's hand. Not too tightly, then turned to my father. "Thank you for coming." When the scene ended, the director came over, praised how natural it looked, and called for a 10-minute break. The crew dispersed. Only my parents and I remained in the corner of the set. My mother looked at me a little unsure. "Blakely, this wasn't easy for me, but I do want to be close to you again." I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't trust them either. As they left, I turned to Thomas. He came over, put his arm around me, kissed my forehead. "I know you're strong, but today, you showed everyone how big your heart really is." I tilted my head and smiled faintly. I knew I had recorded the most staged performance yet. From the director, from my own family. Setting up the climax of the real story. I walked into the wedding hall wearing the white dress Thomas had picked out. It wasn't the dress I'd dreamed of, too extravagant, too perfect by TV standards. The plunging neckline, the cinched waist so tight I had to hold my breath with every step. But I wore it for one reason. The straps had been custom stitched with double lace, where I had cleverly hidden a micro camera. Sloan sourced from a company that supplied documentary filmmakers. Secure, discreet, and capable of recording close-up audio and video throughout the ceremony. I walked slowly down the aisle, guests clapping softly on either side. A few people I once called friends smiled, not out of emotion, but because they knew the cameras were rolling. Soft, golden light, flickering candles, and music rearranged into an acoustic version of Can't Help Falling in Love filled the air. Thomas waited at the end of the aisle in a light gray suit, beaming like this was his own personal special. Everything looked like a dream carefully directed, from every glance to every word. We faced each other, beneath a wooden arch draped with dahlias and faux greenery. The officiant, an actor hired to play a minister, began reading the script. The audience clapped on cue, the camera moved slowly across. "Lately," he said in a warm, deep voice, "today, in front of your friends, your family, and those watching, do you have anything you'd like to say to your partner?" I looked at Thomas. He smiled, nodded slightly, like a cue to remind me, hit the lines, hit the timing, like we'd rehearsed. I took a deep breath, bouquet still in hand. "I do," I said calmly. Then I turned to the audience, my eyes landing on Sloane, sitting in the third row, clutching her purse, the one streaming this event live to YouTube through a private connection. I turned toward the projection screen behind Thomas, the screen originally intended to show a romantic video of his proposal to me by Lake Michigan, beneath a CGI sunset. I lowered the bouquet. But before I say my vows, I continued, I think everyone should know a few things. Because a marriage should begin with the truth, right, Thomas? His smile faltered. Just slightly, but enough for anyone truly watching to notice. I signaled the sound tech in the back, a technician outside the main crew, someone Sloane had quietly arranged in advance. He nodded, and the screen behind Thomas lit up. Everyone expected a dreamy proposal video. But no. The first clip appeared, Thomas talking with the behind-the-scenes director, unaware his mic was still hot. She thinks this is a love story, but it's a season of television. Every doll has an expiration date. She's the version that's good enough to patch together. The room froze. Some people scoffed, others looked around, wondering if it was part of the script. But I stood still, eyes open. Second clip, surveillance footage. Mason, the private investigator, had pulled from the bar where Thomas held his secret bachelor party. Thomas lounged back, arm draped over Aubrey's shoulder, both of them laughing uncontrollably. Then he kissed her, not a clumsy peck, a deliberate, lingering kiss, with his hand in the wrong place. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone leaned over and asked softly, "Is this real?" I didn't need to answer. Final clip, audio, from a private conversation between Thomas and Lucas during a closed-door meeting. "Everything's a product, her, your wife, we're just sharing. Returns, your wife loves the spotlight, she loves feeling loved. Win-win." Lucas laughed loudly in the recording. Thomas clinked glasses with him in response. The room fell completely silent. I turned back to face Thomas. His face had gone pale. Sweat dotted his temples. He stepped back slightly like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. The main camera was still rolling. What they didn't know was that the YouTube livestream, managed by Sloane, had hit nearly 200,000 views in under 10 minutes. Someone on the crew whispered, "Kill the screen, shut it off." But it was too late. I walked off the stage, each step steady, holding the bouquet I had no intention of tossing. The train of my dress brushed the floor, light as air. But behind me, the entire stage had started to shake. 3 days after the wedding was canceled, I left Chicago. No warning, no goodbye post, no farewell selfies. I rolled a small suitcase down Southport Avenue at 7 a.m., the sun barely rising. Inside, a few outfits, some unfinished design drafts, a brown leather notebook, and the laptop I used to edit The Full Truth. Everything else, the wedding dress, the engagement ring, the luxuriously printed invitations, I left behind in the old apartment like discarded stage props. Thomas was fired the next morning. The official statement from the production board read, "Severe breach of professional ethics and abuse of power in the workplace." A few entertainment blogs added more details, clipping the live stream moment where his face turned white at the screen reveal. The comments were split. Some said I was doing too much, others called me an icon of silent revenge. The network later pulled every episode featuring me, but the internet never forgets. A week later, my mother called. 3 times. The first text read, "I can explain." The second, "We were all used, Blakely." The third, "Can you stop treating your family like strangers?" I stared at her name on the screen, then hit decline. I didn't need to hear anything more. I had spent my youth waiting for my family to call at the right times, when I was sick, when I needed help, when I was alone. But they only came back when the script was ready, when the director shouted action. And now that I'd refused to play the part, they felt abandoned. Aubrey did message me, but I knew she was divorced. Lucas was spotted at the usual bar 2 weeks after the wedding, no ring on his finger. Someone took a photo of him alone, beer bottle in hand, staring blankly at the wall. A tabloid headline read, "Drama Bride Destroys 2 Marriages in 1 Day." I scrolled past, didn't save it. One afternoon, while stopped at a bus station between Iowa and Nebraska, I got an email from a stranger. Blakely, I don't know you, but the day you stood there, I saw something I used to wish my mom could have done. Thank you. I never learned the sender's name. Didn't need to. But I reread that line over and over, like it anchored me from dissolving into the cold, empty corridor. I rented a small cabin in a lakeside town in Minnesota. No signage, no clear street names. I started my mornings brewing coffee, watering the garden, then working on a new design for a small book cafe in Vermont, a client referred by Sloan. I didn't talk to the press, didn't accept interviews, didn't exploit the viral story. I told it once, at the right time in the right way. I owed no one the sequel for their entertainment. Tomas, according to rumors, left Chicago. Some say he moved back in with his parents in the suburbs of Cleveland. Others say he changed his social media handles and started blogging about the collapse of fame. I didn't verify. I didn't send legal letters, didn't ask for damages, didn't sue for defamation or image rights. Because I understood. Silence is sometimes the heaviest sentence. Someone like Tomas, someone who lives for the gaze of the crowd, without that gaze, slowly implodes from the inside. No stabbing required. One morning I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching tiny birds perch along the fence. The sunlight warmed my face gently, so gently I had to blink, just to believe the feeling was real. This silence, this truth, this solitude without judgment. I had no regrets for not going further with revenge, because I knew I didn't need to win. I needed to live without being boxed in by someone else's script. To live without needing anyone's permission to feel peace. Seattle welcomed me with soft rain and the faint scent of damp wood in the air. I arrived one afternoon in March carrying a few boxes of books, some old design portfolios, and a lease for a small space in Capitol Hill, where Sloan and I had decided to open a shared studio. She'd moved in a few weeks earlier to prep the furniture and paperwork. I came later, bringing only one thing we had both silently agreed on. We wouldn't retell the old story. Not directly, not with names. We named the studio layered like layers behind a living space, or behind a lens. It was only the size of a small apartment, but full of light. A long table made from reclaimed wood sat in the center. A few potted plants hung from the ceiling beams, and one olive green wall was reserved for sample boards, sketches, and mood boards. Not fancy, but enough to make clients feel safe when they walked in. Just like I was learning to trust again, in real spaces, real people, and projects that didn't come with scripted lines. A week after our opening, Sloan walked into the studio, set a tiny podcast mic on the table, and said, "It's time." I knew she meant the vlog we once talked about, an idea that came up over wine in an empty kitchen in Minnesota. Not to talk about Thomas, she emphasized, but to talk about people like you. The ones labeled drama queens just because they didn't stay silent the way the director wanted. And then, after many delays, I turned on the camera for the first time on a Sunday morning. It was drizzling outside, my voice was a little hoarse from skipping breakfast, but I spoke straight into the lens. I'm not going to say who I am, and I don't need your sympathy. But if you've ever watched a reality show and thought, no way someone would treat the person they love like that, then you've never been behind the camera. That video was 18 minutes long. No background music, no intro, just me holding a cold cup of coffee describing what it felt like to stand on that set. I talked about the times the director made me cry 3 times in a row because the lighting wasn't right, about the day I wanted to leave set from exhaustion but Thomas said, "Don't waste everyone's time," about how I wore the white dress so often that even brushing the lace made me want to throw up. The video was titled "What They Don't Show You on Wedding Specials." We didn't add flashy hashtags, didn't run ads, but by the next morning it had over 2.6 million views. Comments flooded in. "I work post-production for a major show. Everything she said is 100% true. Thank you. I thought I was crazy for thinking those moments felt fake and being too afraid to say it. I was a reality show bride, and I've never seen anyone brave enough to tell it like this." Sloan showed up early that day with 2 matcha lattes, set them down on the table, and casually said, "You just kicked a hornet's nest, but it's the right one." We didn't respond to the media, we kept posting. Once a week, each video a small puzzle piece. Sometimes it was a story about how dress choices were manipulated by the network's stylist team. Sometimes it was a woman describing how the crew made her redo the breakup speech, but with more emotion. Sometimes it was an anonymous guest sharing how edits turned her into the one who ruined love. I still didn't show my face. I filmed from the neck down, or recorded voice only, but people started calling me the woman behind the white dress. And I let them wonder. Work at the studio continued. We designed a bedroom for a newlywed couple, no TV deals, no cameras, just a clear request. We want a bedroom where morning light doesn't wake us up. I created a space with double-layered curtains, clay-colored walls, and low-mount reading lights. When they walked in, the husband said, "Feels like breathing." That afternoon, rain tapped gently against the tall windows of a small workshop space in suburban Seattle. I stood by a whiteboard sketching layout ideas for a studio apartment. The theme of today's talk, designing for healing. About 30 people in the audience, mostly women, some fresh out of school, others older than me, silver streaks in their hair, notebooks and pens in hand. I didn't say much about myself. No one mentioned the name Thomas in that room. We talked about natural light, about how to fold curtains so mornings feel gentler, about fabric textures that don't overwhelm the skin, small details that can help someone reclaim a sense of belonging in their own space. Afterward, during Q&A, a young woman in the second row raised her hand, hesitantly. She looked around 21, wore a gray sweater, voice trembling a little. "Blakely, if you don't mind me asking honestly, how did you get through all of it?" It was an ordinary question, but it echoed inside me like something ancient. The sound of 3mm once, when I sat alone in a kitchen, unsure if I was living or being staged. The sound of questions I used to dodge or rush to answer, so no one else would feel uncomfortable. Then around the room, everyone was silent. No one holding phones, no one distracted. They were really listening. "I didn't get through it by screaming," I said slowly, "or by running away. I did it by rewriting the script." A few people smiled softly. I glanced toward the corner, where a small camera was recording, not for broadcast but for class notes requested by those who couldn't attend. And I thought, if this answer gets recorded, I want it to be truly mine. Unedited, uncut. "There were moments when I thought I was telling the most beautiful love story," I continued, "until I realized I wasn't the one holding the pen." I turned back to the whiteboard and drew a small circle, then expanded it into a larger space around it. In architecture, we call this a breathing room. In life, I call it the right to pause and ask, am I living my own story? Her hand held a pen, but she didn't write, just gripped it tightly. I didn't say more, but in my mind, pieces of my life scrolled like a subtitle, feed beneath the screen. The kitchen in Chicago where I once bit my lip to keep from crying. The fake vow shoot and the hidden camera sewn into my dress. And the first morning I walked out of that old apartment with nothing but the decision to stop living in someone else's mold. Have you ever been in a relationship that looked like a dream until you realized you were a prop in someone else's script? If so, I hope you'll share, not to complain, but to know you're not alone. Some stories, when told, aren't meant to retaliate, but to release. To remind us, sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard, you just need to speak the truth at the right time in the right way. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you've lived through and how you made it out. And if stories like this touch something in you about family, love, dignity, or freedom, subscribe to the channel. Join me as we keep exploring the most honest slices of life, where calm can dismantle even the most carefully staged performance.